Welcome back. Well, today I am joined with Dr. Brittany Kaiser, who is here on behalf of MemorialCare Saddleback Medical Center for Genetic Counseling. Well, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure coming and speaking to you and to everyone.
Thank you. It's interesting, genetic counseling. I mean, you've heard of genetic testing, but I don't think we're very aware of what genetic counseling is. So before we get into what Saddleback MemorialCare has to offer, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of where you studied and how long you've been here.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I've been on this road of genetic counseling for quite a while. I was fortunate enough to go to some schools that had great genetics programs starting as early as in high school. I had wonderful teachers that kind of introduced me to the field, went through that with undergrad and in graduate school. I did my studies, my undergraduate work at UC Irvine, so locally here. And then I did my graduate studies in Manhattan at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. So I worked in research and metabolic genetics in New York for a few years before coming back out here right at the beginning of the pandemic and coming back into a clinical setting to be with patients and joining the cancer field. Yeah.
So genetic counseling versus genetic testing, what is the difference?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. Genetic counseling and genetic testing are kind of two parts of the same puzzle, right? So with genetic testing, that's the actual test itself. Most of the time, that's going to be a blood draw, sometimes a saliva sample. It's what we're doing to really look at the genes and see if anyone was born with something that could be putting them at an increased risk for disease. But that can all be very difficult information to both process and to comprehend. So that's where genetic counseling comes into play. It's kind of the pre and post-test meeting with a genetic counselor such as myself. And we talk about family history, medical history, talk about cancer genetics or whatever field of genetics it's in, and talk about what would benefit the patient and be most beneficial.
So you would be called in by whatever doctor did the testing. Is that correct?
Yes, so sometimes we are the first stop for patients. Sometimes we're the last stop. A lot of times doctors will refer patients to us so that we can do the testing ourselves. That tends to be the more common route. Other times we have doctors who do the testing themselves, and then they send their patients to us to kind of go over those results. But a lot of the times we're with the patient from beginning to end.
So when you say that the doctors send the patient to you're referring to a group, it sounds like. So you have a genetic counseling group at the hospital?
We do, yes. So here at Saddleback MemorialCare, we have 4 genetic counselors who all see patients in cancer genetics. There's a bunch of different specialties of genetic counseling. So there's prenatal, there's cardiac, we all kind of wear different hats. But for me and what I do, I work in the cancer risk and prevention department.
Oh, okay. Now, genetic testing and counseling is generally done if there is suspicion of cancer. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So typically it's done depending on what a patient presents with to their doctor, if there's a family history of cancer. And honestly, sometimes I just have patients who are intrigued with the idea of it, and they'll come to us wanting to be proactive with their health.
Oh, I see. And then exactly what does the genetic test or what does it tell them?
Yeah, so the genetic test itself is basically looking at cancer risk. So it's not saying whether or not someone has cancer. It's not even guaranteeing if someone will get cancer, but it's looking and seeing if they have an increased risk as compared to the general population.
Now, is that something that somebody could just request from their doctor if they would like to know more about it?
Yeah, so typically what I recommend for patients is if it's something that they're interested in, they contact their primary care doctor or a doctor that they trust really well, ask for a referral to genetics or genetic counseling, and then they'll usually be sent to us and we can talk with them a little bit more about what type of testing would be most beneficial for them, what's going to be the most useful for their medical management, and so on and so forth.
Oh, that sounds great. I mean, I always thought that you would only be able to do a genetic test. I mean, of course, you could mail in and do some of those other things,
Right.
But then, which is really just for fun. But then I didn't realize that you could actually make a choice and come see a genetic counselor to decide which would be best for you. That's really a nice option.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I feel like as this field keeps growing, it's becoming a lot more common. We thank those direct to consumer tests, those 23andMe, those ancestry.com for making patients more aware of genetic testing in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really kind of comes down to patients, and we live in an information age. And I feel like a lot of the patients I see now are just genuinely interested in their health background and want to take a proactive approach to their medical management.
Oh, that's a great option. Well, thank you so much for sharing all the information. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to talk about genetics anytime.
I love it. Well, one of these days we'll get more into the weeds of what it really means.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
And if you want more information about the genetic counseling that we just discussed, you can go to memorialcare.org/SB cancer. We'll be right back.